When he said the baby wasn't mine, the room seemed to tilt and I couldn't catch my balance. Those words echoed in my head, sharper than any slap, colder than any winter wind I'd ever felt. I sat on the edge of our bed, the baby monitor buzzing softly in the background, listening to the faint, rhythmic breathing of my newborn son. His tiny fists twitched in sleep, his chest rising and falling so innocently, and I was supposed to believe he wasn't my child? David, my husband of 8 years, stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes avoiding mine. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bedroom, glinting off the wedding ring he never took off. There was something in the way he held himself, rigid, distant, that made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, to shake him until he confessed the truth, but my body betrayed me with silence, disbelief weighing me down. "I'm serious, Laura," he said finally, his voice low, controlled. "The timing, the way things have been, I think it's possible she's not mine." I felt my fingers curl around the soft fabric of the baby blanket, clutching it like a lifeline. My mind raced. Possible? He had never doubted me before. Never. We had shared everything, our dreams, our struggles, our late-night talks when life felt heavy. But in one cruel sentence, he had built a wall between us that I couldn't see over. I don't understand," I whispered. "You're saying you think I cheated?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared out the window, the city lights beginning to twinkle below, refusing to meet my gaze. And in that silence, the accusations sank into every corner of my chest, a mixture of shock, hurt, and fury I couldn't quite name yet. I stood slowly, the baby monitor still humming softly. The faint scent of baby lotion and lavender soap clung to the air, reminders of innocence that now felt tainted by suspicion. My own heartbeat pounded in my ears. I wanted to reach for him, demand an explanation, but my hands trembled too much. "You think I would do this?" I asked finally, voice steadier than I felt. "After everything?" David's lips pressed into a thin line. His silence was louder than words. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just doubting the child. He was doubting me, the woman he had promised to love and protect, the mother of his child, the partner he had built his life with. I sank back onto the edge of the bed, wrapping the baby blanket tighter around my knees. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to will the panic from my chest, but it clung stubbornly like smoke. My mind raced, piecing together the last months, the late nights at work, the unusual calls he never explained, the way he sometimes disappeared for hours without telling me where he was going. Had I missed something? Had I been blind? No. I shook my head. I had been present, attentive, loving. Every appointment, every sleepless night, every whispered lullaby, I had been there. I had never once given him a reason to doubt me. And yet, here we were. "I want a test," I said finally, my voice firm despite the trembling. "A DNA test. I don't care if it proves it's mine or not. We're going to know the truth, David." He finally looked at me then, and for a brief moment I thought I saw hesitation, or maybe it was fear. His face paled slightly, lips parted, but no words came. I realized then that the path ahead would not be simple. Accusations like his leave traces. They twist love into suspicion, hope into anxiety, and whatever the test revealed, nothing would ever be the same again. I stood, gathering myself. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the storm swirling around him. I whispered to him soft and steady, "You're mine, sweet boy. I promise I'll protect you." That promise, I knew, was the only thing I could hold on to. And deep down, a small part of me felt the stirring of suspicion. Maybe the DNA test wouldn't just reveal the truth about our child. Maybe it would reveal the truth about my husband, too. I didn't know it yet, but the world I thought I understood was about to unravel in ways I could never imagine. Before that afternoon, life felt ordinary, comfortable, predictable, and quietly warm. Our mornings were a routine of coffee brewing, the soft hum of the baby monitor, and David's teasing banter as he tried to get me out of bed. I remember the smell of cinnamon toast and freshly brewed coffee filling the kitchen, the sunlight spilling across the countertop as I prepared bottles for our son. David and I had met in college. He was charming, attentive, a little stubborn, but in a way that made me laugh. After years of dating, we married, bought a small house, and dreamed of growing our family. When I discovered I was pregnant, the joy had been overwhelming. I still remembered the way he held my hand in the ultrasound room, the tremor in his voice as we saw our baby for the first time. I believed we were building a life on trust and love, one small, quiet moment at a time. Our home reflected that. Every corner had a story. Baby clothes folded carefully in drawers, family photos on the walls, handprints painted on the hallway wall, reminders of life's small milestones. The kitchen smelled faintly of vanilla candles in the evening, and the living room had a well-worn sofa where we spent countless nights watching movies or reading together while the baby slept. I worked part-time from home, writing articles and helping local organizations with community projects. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me connected to the world beyond our walls. And I loved being able to watch my son grow, to see his first smile, his first wobbly steps, without missing a single moment. David worked long hours at the firm, and though he was often tired, he was affectionate, protective, and engaged. We argued occasionally, small disagreements about finances or household chores, but nothing that shook the foundation of our marriage, or so I thought. Even after the baby arrived, life had a rhythm. Night feedings, diaper changes, lullabies whispered in the soft glow of the nursery lamp. I remember holding him in the rocking chair, feeling his tiny heartbeat against my chest, and thinking, this is love. This is what it's supposed to feel like. We had dreams for the future, vacations to the coast, plans to redecorate the nursery, hopes of another child one day. I had never imagined that suspicion could enter so quietly, like a shadow at the edge of a room, until that afternoon when David's words shattered everything. It didn't make sense. We had built trust slowly, carefully, brick by brick. I had never given him reason to doubt me, yet now I was facing the unimaginable, being accused of betraying him, of betraying the very family we had created together. Even as I carried on our daily routines after that first confrontation, a small knot of unease had settled deep in my stomach. I noticed tiny things I had never paid attention to before, the way his phone buzzed a little too often, the sudden late nights at the office, the way he sometimes avoided my gaze when I spoke to him about simple matters. I brushed them off at first. I told myself I was overthinking, that postpartum anxiety could make the most rational woman suspicious. But each day the unease grew. The cozy warmth of our home began to feel fragile, as if every corner held secrets I couldn't yet see. Still, I tried to focus on our son. I sang to him, rocked him in my arms, and whispered words of love and reassurance, even when my heart ached. I reminded myself that nothing could take away the bond we had, the life I had carried and nurtured. But at night, when the house was silent and David's shadow no longer filled the corners, I lay awake imagining the unthinkable. Could he be right? The thought was unbearable, yet it gnawed at me, and in that quiet I knew what I had to do. I had to know the truth, not just for him, not just for our marriage, but for my son. I owed him certainty, love, and protection from a world where even the people who should care most could betray him. So I made a decision. I would demand a DNA test. I would face David, face the possibility of heartbreak, and see clearly what the future held. Even as I scheduled the appointment, I felt a flicker of determination. My son deserved clarity. I deserved the truth. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice told me that the test wouldn't just reveal paternity, it might reveal the hidden corners of David's own life. And though I didn't understand it fully yet, I sensed that the next few days would change everything. The first clue came one evening when I returned home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet, and the faint glow of the kitchen light made the room look almost sterile. I called out, "David?" but there was no answer. I noticed his briefcase on the counter, unzipped, papers slightly askew. My stomach tightened. He was usually meticulous about his things. Curiosity mixed with dread, and I carefully glanced at the papers. There, half hidden under a pile of invoices, was a small envelope with someone else's name on it. My first instinct was to push it aside, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but something compelled me to look. The letter was typed, formal, and addressed to him directly. It mentioned account transfers and discrepancies I didn't understand, but the tone hinted at secrecy, at concealment. That night, David came home later than usual, avoiding my questions, his phone constantly buzzing in his pocket. He answered with clipped responses, a polite but cold distance that made my chest ache. I tried to convince myself it was stress, deadlines, exhaustion, but the unease had already rooted itself. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more than what he was telling me. A few days later, during a quiet moment while rocking our son to sleep, I noticed the subtle change in his behavior. He would sometimes check his phone in another room, stiffening when I entered, calls from unknown numbers, brief texts deleted before I could see them. I felt like I was standing in the shadows, watching a man I thought I knew, realizing there were doors I had never opened. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. "Don't assume," I whispered to myself in the nursery, brushing back my hair as I watched my son sleep. But doubt is a sneaky thing. It doesn't wait for evidence. It crawls in quietly, settles in your chest, and refuses to leave. One night, I overheard a snippet of a phone conversation he thought I wasn't listening to. His voice was hushed, tense. "Yes, everything is in place. Just make sure she doesn't find out." And then he hung up abruptly. My heart skipped. That was it. The final seed of suspicion had been planted. I tried to push it away, telling myself I was imagining things, but the truth clawed at me. Something wasn't right, and it had nothing to do with me. My mind replayed the earlier accusation, him claiming the baby wasn't his, and a sick realization settled. What if the lie he told me wasn't about the baby at all? I began noticing small inconsistencies, mismatched receipts, vague explanations for late nights, a tension in his demeanor whenever money or appointments were mentioned. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I could feel it. My husband, the man I had trusted implicitly, was hiding something. I didn't act immediately. I watched, I listened, I documented quietly. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed certainty, a foundation of facts. The thought of a DNA test lingered in my mind, but I also needed to be sure this wasn't just paranoia fueled by hurt. Then came the evening when everything seemed to align, the day I knew I could no longer ignore the signs. I found a small folded envelope slipped under the kitchen door. It wasn't addressed to me, but the handwriting was unmistakable, David's. Inside were statements, transactions, and letters that confirmed my growing suspicion. He wasn't questioning the paternity of our child out of carelessness or confusion. He was projecting, deflecting from his own secrets. I stared at the papers for hours, the room dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen lamp. My hands shook as I realized the scope of what I had uncovered. David had been living a life I knew nothing about, a life that explained his sudden cruelty, his accusations, his distance. The DNA test, I decided, was no longer just about the baby. It was about truth. It was about exposing the hidden corners of our marriage, the secrets that could no longer remain in the shadows. I resolved to schedule it immediately, bracing myself for whatever the results might reveal. And in that quiet moment, as I sat on the kitchen floor surrounded by evidence, I understood the enormity of what lay ahead. The confrontation would not be simple, the revelations would not be gentle, but I also knew something else. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only way to reclaim my peace, my dignity, and my son's rightful security. I didn't know yet what the DNA results would show, but I did know one thing. Whatever came next, I would face it with clarity, courage, and the unshakable resolve to protect the life I had created. The day of the DNA test felt impossibly long. I held our son in my arms, whispering lullabies I wasn't sure I even believed anymore. His soft breathing, the little hiccups that made him scrunch his tiny nose, reminded me of everything I was fighting to protect. And yet, in the pit of my stomach, a cold dread had settled. I was about to uncover a truth that could either shatter or vindicate the fragile family I had worked so hard to nurture. David sat across from me at the clinic, fidgeting with his watch, avoiding eye contact. He didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't offer comfort. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, a sterile reminder that this was a test of more than biology. It was a test of trust. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, pressing against my chest. When the nurse finally handed me the paperwork with instructions, I read through the details carefully. The day of the DNA test felt impossibly long. I held our son in my arms, whispering lullabies I wasn't sure I even believed anymore. His soft breathing, the little hiccups that made him scrunch his tiny nose, reminded me of everything I was fighting to protect. And yet, in the pit of my stomach, a cold dread had settled. I was about to uncover a truth that could either shatter or vindicate the fragile family I had worked so hard to nurture. David sat across from me at the clinic, fidgeting with his watch, avoiding eye contact. He didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't offer comfort. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, a sterile reminder that this was a test of more than biology. It was a test of trust. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, pressing against my chest. When the nurse finally handed me the paperwork with instructions, I read through the details carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I signed the forms. The baby's sample was taken first, tiny swabs from his cheek, his little face puckered and squirming. I whispered reassurances, feeling the weight of every word. Then it was David's turn. He sat rigid, lips pressed into a line, eyes darting nervously around the room. He didn't meet my gaze as they swabbed the inside of his mouth. And in that moment, I noticed something I hadn't before, a subtle tension, a flicker of guilt that he couldn't hide no matter how hard he tried. I left the clinic carrying a quiet, heavy anger. The waiting period would be brief, but it felt eternal. Every phone vibration made my heart leap. Every knock at the door made me brace for news. And all the while, I couldn't shake the sense that the DNA results were not just about our baby, they were about something deeper, a betrayal I had yet to fully comprehend. When the call finally came, my hands shook as I answered. The voice on the line was professional, calm, and clipped, but it didn't matter. I already knew the result before they even said a word. Our son was mine. A mixture of relief and rage washed over me in equal measure. Relief because my baby was indeed mine. Rage because David's cruel accusation had been a lie, a tool to deflect attention from his own secrets. I had stayed quiet, endured suspicion and verbal cruelty, and now I realized the betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. I confronted him that evening, our son asleep in the nursery. "The test is clear," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "He's mine, David. You lied. You accused me of something I never did." He didn't answer first. His shoulders slumped, the air around him heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Finally, he spoke, voice low and hesitant. I didn't know how to tell you," he admitted. I thought you'd leave if you knew." I stared at him, disbelief coursing through me. Leave? Leave? David, what are you talking about? He swallowed hard, eyes avoiding mine. There's someone else. I've been involved. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to lose everything. The room spun. My son's tiny cries from the monitor seemed distant, echoing as if from another world. Betrayal, shock, heartbreak, they all collided in my chest. The man I had trusted, the man who had promised to love and protect me, had built a secret life that now lay bare. I could feel the betrayal in every fiber of my being. The anger burned hot, a fire I struggled to contain. But beneath it all, beneath the disbelief and hurt, a new resolve began to take shape. I would not let this betrayal define me or our child. I would not let secrecy and deceit control the life I had built. The confrontation was raw, emotional. I demanded answers, demanded honesty, demanded to know how long this had been going on, who had been involved, and why he had lied. Each answer was a dagger, each admission another weight pressing down. And yet, through it all, I kept my focus on one thing, the truth, unvarnished and undeniable. By the end of that night, I understood something crucial. The DNA test had done more than confirm my child's parentage. It had unveiled a hidden reality, one that I needed to face head on. I couldn't change the past, but I could control how I responded, how I protected my son, how I reclaimed my life. And for the first time since the accusations began, I felt a flicker of clarity. The betrayal was immense, but it would not break me. I would stand firm for myself, for our son, and for the life we deserved. After the confrontation, I spent hours pacing the living room, my son asleep upstairs, the soft glow of his nightlight casting long shadows across the walls. My mind spun with anger, hurt, and determination. I realized that waiting, ignoring, or letting David's deceit go unchallenged was no longer an option. I needed action, but it had to be careful, deliberate, and controlled. First, I called a close friend I trusted completely. Her calm voice helped me untangle the knots in my thoughts. "You have the DNA results," she said gently. "You have proof. Now you need to decide what this means for you, for your son." Her words were simple, but they hit me like a lifeline. Proof, evidence, that's what I needed to navigate this storm. It wasn't about revenge or punishment, not yet. It was about clarity, protection, and reclaiming my life. I started by documenting everything, every suspicious call David had made, every unexplained absence, every conversation where he had tried to deflect blame or plant doubt. I collected the paperwork from the DNA test, made copies, stored them in a secure place. The quiet act of gathering facts gave me a small measure of control in a situation that had felt chaotic and unfair. Next, I confronted him again, this time with calm precision. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, though the urge burned inside me. I spoke slowly, deliberately, my voice firm. "David, the DNA test proves our son is mine. Your lies, your secret life, I need transparency. Now." He hesitated, guilt etched across his face, but I could see he realized the tide had turned. I demanded honesty about his affair, about what had been happening behind my back. He confessed, reluctantly, naming the woman and admitting to months of deceit. Every word was a blow, but I held my ground. I needed the truth, no matter how painful, so I could make the right decisions for myself and my child. I also knew legal protection was essential. I contacted a lawyer specializing in family law. I explained the situation, DNA results, marital deceit, hidden relationships. We discussed options for custody, protection, and ensuring that my son's life would remain stable and secure. The lawyer's calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions I had been living in, and it reminded me that steps could be taken to create a safe, structured path forward. Throughout all of this, I remained focused on my son. I spent time with him, rocking him in my arms, whispering reassurances that he was safe, that I was his protector, that nothing could take away the bond we shared. Those quiet moments became my anchor. His trust, his innocence, and his love reminded me why I needed to act with clarity, not chaos. And then I devised a plan to confront the social aspect of David's betrayal. I would not shout or humiliate him publicly, but I needed boundaries and accountability. I informed close family members I trusted, explaining the situation calmly and clearly. Their support was immediate, a buffer against the isolation David had tried to create through secrecy and manipulation. I also began to document my emotional journey. Writing in a journal each night, I recorded feelings of betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, but also moments of clarity, courage, and determination. I knew that someday, perhaps for myself or for others, these reflections would serve as proof of my resilience. One evening, as David returned from work, I felt a shift inside me. I was no longer the woman cowering under suspicion. I spoke firmly about boundaries. Honesty, transparency, and respect would be required if he wanted to remain part of our lives. My voice, calm and unwavering, carried the weight of years of love, patience, and now resolve. For the first time, I realized that my reaction was not just about exposing him, it was about reclaiming myself. Each decision, each step, each demand for truth was a brick in rebuilding the life that had been threatened. The DNA test had been the trigger, but my actions now would define the future. Even in moments of quiet reflection, I felt strength growing inside me. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that emotional scars might remain, but I also knew I could navigate it with dignity. I had proof, I had allies, and most importantly, I had my son and the unwavering truth of our bond. By the end of that week, the first steps towards restructuring our lives were in motion. Legal consultations, honest conversations, and careful boundaries created a framework for moving forward. David's betrayal was no longer a secret hidden in the shadows. It had been exposed, measured, and accounted for. And though my heart still ached, a small seed of peace took root. I realized that confronting deceit wasn't just about retribution, it was about survival, protection, and the courage to demand honesty in a world where trust had been shattered. It didn't take long for the truth to ripple beyond the walls of our home. I had decided that our family and close friends deserved to know, not to gossip, but to understand the reality and protect my son from whispers and half-truths. I wanted transparency, not humiliation. But in the end, David's betrayal could no longer stay hidden. I started with his closest family, his parents, his siblings. I invited them over one afternoon, our son playing quietly in the corner, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. I spoke carefully, recounting the events, presenting the DNA results, and explaining David's actions. There was a hush, an uncomfortable silence as the weight of the revelation settled. I watched faces shift from shock to disbelief to quiet understanding. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" his mother asked softly, her voice heavy with concern and sorrow. "I needed proof," I replied steadily, holding the envelope of DNA results in my hand. "I couldn't act on suspicion alone. But now there's no question. The baby is mine, and the betrayal, everything hidden, needs to be addressed openly." His family didn't defend him. I sensed a mix of anger and sorrow. They were processing their own disappointment, recognizing the man they had trusted was flawed. And that acknowledgement, painful as it was for everyone, gave me a strange sense of relief. The secret could no longer thrive in silence. Next came his business circle. He had spent months cultivating an image of success, of reliability, of stability, but the hidden affair and his deceit could not stay buried forever. Carefully, I shared information with his business partners where appropriate, framed with facts and documentation. I didn't seek to humiliate him, but honesty was a shield for me and our son. His credibility suffered, conversations shifted, and doors that once opened easily began to close. In the community, subtle actions had their effect. Friends who had noticed his strange behavior approached me with quiet concern. I didn't broadcast our private lives, but the truth trickled out in measured doses, protecting our son while ensuring that David's misdeeds were acknowledged. The most profound moment came when I confronted him directly about accountability. Standing in the living room, I felt the full weight of our shared history, the laughter and tears we had experienced together, and the shadow that his betrayal had cast over it all. "People are starting to see the truth," I said calmly, looking him in the eye. "This isn't about punishment for me, it's about responsibility. You need to face the consequences of your actions, not just for me, but for yourself and for our son." He nodded slowly, the fight leaving him. There was no bravado, no excuses, just acknowledgement. And in that moment, I realized something important. Justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet consequences that cut deepest. The loss of trust, the recognition of deceit, the realignment of relationships based on truth rather than illusion. I could see how much the exposure of his betrayal affected him. His once confident demeanor had softened into humility tinged with regret. And while I didn't feel the need to gloat or inflict pain, I understood the satisfaction of moral accountability. Through all of this, my focus remained my son. I noticed how he thrived amidst the honesty, how our routines and rituals of care provided stability despite the chaos that had entered our lives. Friends and family rallied, offering support and presence, and it became clear that the community's acknowledgement of truth was not about shame, it was about protection, integrity, and rebuilding trust. There were quiet moments, too. Walks in the park, laughter over simple meals, bedtime stories whispered in the nursery glow. In those moments, I realized the public acknowledgement of deceit had done more than punish David. It had restored balance, drawn clear boundaries, and ensured a foundation of truth for our son's upbringing. And David, stripped of secrecy, faced the reality he had hidden for months. There was no more manipulation, no more diversion, only the consequences of his choices, witnessed by those who mattered most. I had expected anger, confrontation, maybe even resentment, but what emerged was clarity, accountability, and a strange sense of dignity for all involved. By the end of this chapter, I understood a profound lesson. Betrayal, no matter how hidden, cannot withstand the light of truth. Exposure doesn't need to be cruel, it simply needs to be real. And when the truth is revealed, consequences unfold naturally, with fairness and moral weight guiding the outcome. Through it all, I discovered that protecting the ones we love often requires courage, strategy, and patience. It's not about revenge, it's about asserting boundaries, demanding honesty, and ensuring that deception cannot survive unchecked. And while I could not erase the past, I could control the way the present and future unfolded. I realized that public consequence, when approached with calm and dignity, could be transformative, not only for the betrayer, but for the one who had been wronged, and for the innocent child caught in the middle. In the weeks that followed, a quiet calm began to settle over our home. The storm of accusations, DNA tests, and confessions had passed, leaving behind a landscape of truth, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without the constant weight of doubt pressing against my chest. I focused on rebuilding, not just for myself, but for my son. Our mornings were filled with the smell of toast and coffee, the soft giggles that came from little footsteps chasing the sunlight across the kitchen floor. I reveled in the simplicity of it all. The mundane routines that had once seemed ordinary now felt precious. Therapy became a cornerstone of my healing. Sitting with a counselor, I could unpack the emotional wreckage without judgment, tracing the lines of betrayal and pain, and learning how to separate the hurt inflicted by David from my own self-worth. The sessions were gentle yet powerful. I discovered resilience I hadn't known existed, and slowly the anger that had burned so hot began to cool into clarity and understanding. David and I had limited contact. I had set firm boundaries, and he had accepted them, quietly understanding the consequences of his choices. There was no reconciliation yet, perhaps there never would be, but I felt no lingering need for confrontation. His part in my life had changed, and I accepted it. The liberation in that realization was profound. I also strengthened bonds with friends and family. They had stood by me through the uncertainty, the late-night tears, the whispered fears, and the eventual revelation. We celebrated small victories together, a birthday for my son, a quiet weekend without tension, laughter over shared meals. These moments reminded me that life, even after betrayal, could be tender, warm, and restorative. One afternoon, I found myself holding the DNA report again, the paper crisp and official in my hands. I didn't feel anger this time. I felt empowered. That single piece of evidence had done more than confirm my child's parentage. It had given me the clarity to demand honesty, the courage to set boundaries, and the opportunity to reclaim my dignity. I began to reflect on forgiveness, not for David's sake, but for my own. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past or excusing betrayal. It means letting go of the hold that anger and resentment have over your life. I learned to forgive in small steps, acknowledging the pain, recognizing the lessons, and choosing to move forward without bitterness. Parenting became even more intentional. I poured love and presence into my son's life, mindful that the foundation of trust and security I provided would be his anchor. Every bedtime story, every shared laugh, every reassuring hug became a thread in a tapestry of resilience and unconditional love. I also took time to rediscover myself. Hobbies I had set aside, passions I had shelved, and dreams I had postponed were slowly returning. Painting, writing, and quiet walks became acts of self-care, affirming that I was more than the betrayal I had endured. Life could be rebuilt, strengthened by the challenges, not defined by them. In moments of reflection, I realized something profound. The pain I had endured had shaped me, yes, but it had also unveiled my strength. The betrayal that once seemed insurmountable became a testament to my resilience, my ability to protect what mattered most, and my capacity to heal. I also recognized the importance of boundaries. Trust, once broken, cannot be handed back blindly, but it can be rebuilt slowly, carefully, with honesty as the cornerstone. In my own heart, I found the courage to let go of fear and suspicion, replacing it with wisdom and discernment. Life was quieter now, yes, but in that quiet, I discovered richness. I discovered the depth of maternal love, the power of self-respect, and the beauty of living with integrity. And above all, I discovered that even after betrayal, one can find peace, joy, and hope for the future. Every evening, as I watched my son drift into sleep, I whispered the same promise to myself. No secret, no lie, no act of deceit could ever diminish the bond we shared, nor could it steal the life I had fought to protect. And in that knowledge, I found serenity.
I knew the road ahead would have challenges. Relationships would need careful navigation. David's presence, limited as it was, remained a variable. But I felt grounded. I had faced the storm, and I had emerged intact, stronger and wiser. And in that strength, I found my peace.
As I sit here, watching my son sleep, I can finally take a deep breath without the weight of fear and betrayal pressing down. The journey hasn't been easy. There were nights filled with doubt, mornings where the pain felt too heavy to bear, and moments when I questioned everything I thought I knew about love and trust. But through it all, I learned a truth I want to share with anyone watching. The bonds we nurture, the honesty we demand, and the courage to protect what matters most are the forces that can rebuild a life, even after betrayal. I don't tell this story to shame or to punish, but to reflect, to show that truth has power and that healing is possible. Life doesn't end because someone betrays us. It begins again, in the small moments, in choices guided by love, clarity, and self-respect. To those who have faced deceit or betrayal in your own lives, know this: the storm doesn't define you. Your response does. Protect yourself, seek the truth, and hold close the ones who matter most. Your strength is greater than you realize. Would you have confronted the betrayal the way I did? Would you have waited for proof or acted on instinct? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. If this story touched you, or if you want to follow more real-life journeys of love, betrayal, and resilience, subscribe for new emotional storytime videos every week. Together, we can explore the lessons, the heartbreak, and the hope that life offers, even in the most unexpected moments. Because in every story of betrayal, there is also a story of strength, and sometimes the greatest triumph is simply reclaiming your peace.